Another Goffmanian concept is the concept of civil inattention. What is civil inattention? Civil inattention is basically the idea that when two people are walking down the street and they walk up to each other on the street, they will frequently, notice I say frequently, this is a probabilistic statement, not always, they will frequently look down as they get closer to one another. Have any of you ever noticed that? Well, that's the word for it. It's the word for it because Goffman came along and gave it a name. And he explained that there is actually a need for that in everyday life, that people actually feel threatened if they walk up to each other and they stare at them straight in the eyes when they walk by. Now, it's not necessarily the case that they just feel threatened, but it is a norm of our society that people do not look straight into the other person's eyes as they pass them in most situations. You don't go like this to someone. I'd be curious once again how it is where you live. Now, there's a certain kind of thing that we might call social competence, and part of social competence is the ability to figure out how to act in certain kinds of situations. And one of the things that we try to do when we act and we move down the street is we try to look down. Now, there's a very specific way in which that occurs. It doesn't occur like 10 seconds before. At least here in Princeton and in most parts of the United States, it's something that occurs when you're walking and you're there and you look down maybe 2 or 3 seconds before you're going to pass, and then you look up again. So it's sort of like this. You're getting close to the person, and then as you get close to them, you look down, and then as you're passing them, you're down, and then you look up again. Now, I realize that there are probably some people right here on the Princeton campus who do not know this, and this is a good time to learn. In fact, if this is why you came to Princeton or to Princeton Online, and you learn nothing else while you're here except how to do civil inattention, let me tell you, it can get you very far in life. But actually, I may be exaggerating, because in many parts of the world where the students in this class are sitting right now, what I am saying may not be true, and I really want to hear from you on the discussion boards about that. Have you ever worked in an office before where people didn't understand that you say hello at the beginning of the day, but not every single time that you pass the person by after you get into the office? Okay, so I've had colleagues where I get into the office and we say hi in the morning. You know, we come in every day, we're always there, right? We say hello, and then we go to our offices and we're doing our work, and then we come out again a few minutes later. I'm going to the copying machine, say, and they're going to the bathroom, and we pass each other by, and he says hi, and I'm like, hi. And then not long after that, because there's a lot of these little encounters that go on among people that work along a common hallway together, we pass each other by again, and we look at each other, and the person looks into your face and goes, like, waves and says hi again. And this can go on and on throughout the day. So the question is, how do you teach this person very subtly, because there is a certain amount of tact involved and a certain kind of subtle signal, that you are not going to say hello 25 times every single day for the rest of your career? This will not happen. So, you know, you develop ways of doing it. You walk by, you look down, you kind of do it like that. But these are things that 99% of the population learns and figures out. Every once in a while, there's someone who doesn't, and then they have to be instructed in a tactful way. So that's the idea of civil inattention. Now, civil inattention can be a source of humor, but it can also be a source of its opposite. It can be a source of death. There are people that die because they don't know how to do civil inattention. It happens when they are passing each other by on the street, and one is in a gang and the other's in a gang, and one member of the social unit is threatening it to another, and all of a sudden one stares into the face of the other. Perhaps they didn't learn their lesson, and somebody else comes out and shoots them because they felt as though they would be threatened. And I'm not making this up. Civil inattention can be a matter of life and death. Elijah Anderson, professor of sociology at Yale, and the pioneering figure, really, in the effort to bring the Goffmanian concepts of social interaction to the ghetto and to try to understand how they work in the framework of intense poverty and racial segregation, he has discovered how deadly it can be when people don't get this stuff at a micro-interactional level, when they don't understand it in situations where a threat is really crucial. One of the things that Anderson has discovered about many low-income neighborhoods is that in those situations, social status is extremely undefined. People don't necessarily know where they stand all the time for reasons that are particular to the nature of ghetto life. And as a result, the very small slights and small disrespects can lead to things that in everyday life can actually take on much greater significance and result in much higher levels of violent activity. So civil inattention is a source of humor, and it's something to laugh at quite reasonably, but it's also a source of great seriousness in the lives of many, many people, a matter of life and death. So for any of you who live in the United States, at least, where this definitely applies, and who didn't understand this, now you do. Now you can feel that my lecture has saved your life. A third way that we think about social interaction and other concepts that we've used has to do with conversation analysis. Now, conversation has a tremendous amount in it that is taken for granted, and one of the things that we have discovered in studying conversation is that most conversation occurs through what might be called adjacency pairs. And what an adjacency pair is a unit of conversation that contains an exchange of one turn each by two speakers. So people who have studied conversation have found that turns are functionally related to one another, and that we know how to do them as a matter of course from early in our lives. So let me give you an example. Hello. Hello. It's as simple as that, right? Now, you've known that from around 9 months, though you might not have been able to articulate it until a little bit later. You say hello to a little child, or hi, and the child looks up and maybe gives you a smile, or if the baby's in a bad mood, maybe starts crying. And soon after that, the youngest people soon understand that hello means that you say hi. That's the adjacency pair. If I say hello to you, you say hello back to me. It's two bits that are functionally related to one another. If I say goodbye, you say bye. I say take care, and you say okay. That's an adjacency pair. Some kind of response is the other side of the adjacency pair. If you walk up to someone and say hello, and they just stare at you, I'm telling you, you know there's a problem. You don't know exactly what the problem is, but you know that something isn't going right. If I say hello, and I don't get anything, I start to feel a little bit disconcerted. If you go up to somebody and you're leaving and you say goodbye, and there's a long pause, you know there's a problem if they don't respond. It's as simple as that. At least here in Princeton and other places that I've lived, that's the way it works. And conversation analysts who have studied these things around the world have found that this finding is pretty consistent in many places. But I'd like to hear how this works where you live. This is such a basic aspect of conversation, but it's something that we so take for granted. And the conversation analysts in sociology have made it more explicit, and it has implications that we'll see in a few minutes. Where there's the question in the answer pair, you say, how are you? Someone else says, fine. But here's some more important, very important information. Not always. That's important too. If you haven't learned this yet, I'm telling you, if you come to Princeton or Princeton Online just to learn one thing, this could be it. If someone says, how you doing? Don't necessarily start telling them. Sometimes it's better to just let it go. Say, fine. But you should give the answer. Like, what you should do to be a socially competent person is give the answer, but then move on. Okay? Because that's another thing. It's kind of like the person who says hello every time you pass them by, 30 times in a day, is the person who, when you say, how's it going, says, you won't believe what happened to me today. And then they go on and on and on and on, and they do the same thing every time that you ask them. And suddenly you're like, oh my, I have to stop asking this person how they're doing. I just can't ask them anymore. I have to show respect in some other way. But I will not say, how are you doing? So you walk up to the person and you just say, hi. Or you signal to them in some other way that's respectful and kind and nice, but not, how are you? Because they don't understand that. And again, I want to know how this resonates with you where you live, or if it sounds just completely strange. But what's important is that people are necessarily collaborating to perform normal interactions. And what we have learned as students of conversation is that people are necessarily able to have very extraordinary and exquisite judgment with regard to the timing of these. And they read and they deploy timings in conversation in very precise ways, so that 0.3 of a second of a delay in a conversation is enough to signal that there's a problem. If I say to you hello and you delay for 0.3 of a second, I am going to understand. Not because I'm a student of conversation, but just because I'm a normal human being. Well, normal in some ways. A normal human being, that's a problem. If I say hi and there's a 0.3 of a second delay, I'm like, oh, okay, there's something wrong here. Now, one of the things that Goffman understood was that there are times when we are constantly trying to save the face of other people, which is most of the time, actually. We're trying to save our own faces, and we're trying to save the face of other people. Not as a goal of interaction, but as an assumption of interaction. And yet, even though we're not thinking of it all the time, we are incredibly able to move into that terrain of saving the face of the other if we so desire. And most of us do so desire most of the time. And frequently, the way that we go about doing that is through processes of timing within the conversations themselves. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine that Mahmoud in Tehran was here in Princeton for a while. If I say to you, Mahmoud, do you want to go to the movie tonight? You might say, I'd really like to, but... Now, Mahmoud may say, let me check with my girlfriend, or let me check with my mother who's coming into town, or let me check with this or that. He might just say to me, well, maybe not tonight, but maybe another night. But the one thing that I can almost guarantee, I can predict that Mahmoud, and probably almost anybody else, is not going to say to me, no. Okay, they're not going to answer the question with an immediate no, because the hardest word, in the English language at least, for anybody to articulate most of the time is no. So the odds are that if Mahmoud doesn't want to go to the movie with me, the odds are that he's going to say, well, actually, and before he has a chance to actually answer the question, I, as a socially competent human being trying to collaborate with him on saving face, I'm going to say, oh, well, how about another time? And then at the end, I understand that either I have to come up with some really subtle way of figuring out if he wants to go to that movie without putting him in that position again, or I basically never ask him again, right? And then I wait for him maybe to signal to me, oh, do you still want to go see a movie sometime? But I have to give him a way out. Part of what it means to be a socially competent human being is to collaborate through processes of conversation and through our exquisite timings and understanding to know that the slightest pause is an opportunity to resist saying no. Because it's a lot nicer if someone comes up to you and says, do you want to go to a movie on Saturday night? It's a lot nicer for them, for you not to say, no, I don't think so. I don't think that will be happening. So maybe you should make another plan.